My name is Florence, and I'm 68 years old. I still remember the shock when my daughter-in-law violently threw my dinner plate to the floor at La Maison restaurant. "Witch, you should have never come!" she screamed as everyone stared. The betrayal cut deeper when my son Michael just sat there silent, not defending his own mother. The humiliation was unbearable. What they didn't expect was the certified letter that arrived from my lawyer the following Monday. Let me know in the comments where you're watching from, and hit subscribe. Sometimes the deepest wounds come from those we love most. I always thought Harold and I had raised our son right. Michael was our only child born after years of trying. Harold was a civil engineer who worked long hours designing bridges across the country, while I taught piano lessons from our home in Connecticut. We weren't wealthy, but we provided Michael with a stable, loving home. Harold and I celebrated 42 wonderful years together before pancreatic cancer took him from us 10 years ago. He left me financially secure with a paid-off home and a substantial life insurance policy. I missed him terribly, but found comfort in my close relationship with Michael, who had become a history professor at the state university by then. When Michael introduced me to Tiffany 5.5 years ago, I was thrilled. She was stylish and articulate with auburn hair and a bright smile. As the art director at a local marketing firm, she exuded confidence. Most importantly, she seemed to make my son happy. "Mom, she's the one," Michael confided after their third date, his eyes shining with the same excitement I'd seen when he got his first bicycle. Their wedding was small but elegant. I contributed $20,000 toward their special day, though Tiffany's parents could have easily covered it all. Joseph and Martha lived in a sprawling house in Greenwich and made no secret of their wealth. Still, I wanted to do my part. "Florence, what a beautiful ceremony," Tiffany gushed at the reception, hugging me tightly. "Thank you for raising such an amazing man. I promise to take good care of him." Those early days were lovely. Sunday dinners became our tradition, either at my house or their new apartment. I gave them a generous down payment for their first home as a wedding gift. Tiffany would ask for my recipes and seemed interested in family stories. She even called me regularly just to chat. "You're so lucky, Florence," my friend Barbara would say. "So many women clash with their daughters-in-law, but you hit the jackpot." I remember the first Thanksgiving after they married. Tiffany insisted on hosting, and I brought my special cranberry relish and pumpkin cheesecake. "Florence, these are amazing," Tiffany said, serving herself seconds of both. "You have to teach me your secrets." I beamed with pride, so grateful for this new daughter in my life. When Michael looked at us laughing together in the kitchen, he seemed deeply content. "My two favorite women," he called us. In those days, we talked openly about their plans to start a family. I was careful not to pressure them, but I didn't hide my excitement about potentially becoming a grandmother. "When you have children," I said once, "I'd be happy to help with babysitting. I could watch the little one while you're at work." Something flickered across Tiffany's face, then a momentary tightness around her mouth that disappeared so quickly I thought I'd imagined it. "That's very generous," she replied, her voice slightly cooler than before. It was the first sign of trouble, though I didn't recognize it then. The real shift came after their third anniversary. They invited me to dinner at an upscale Italian restaurant downtown. Michael seemed nervous, fidgeting with his silverware throughout the appetizer. Finally, as our entrees arrived, he reached for Tiffany's hand. "Mom, we have some exciting news," he announced, breaking into a wide grin. "Tiffany's pregnant. You're going to be a grandmother." I gasped with delight, tears springing to my eyes. "Oh my goodness, this is wonderful news." I stood to embrace them both. Tiffany accepted my hug somewhat stiffly. When I asked about the due date and how she was feeling, she answered briefly, changing the subject quickly. As we finished dessert, I couldn't contain my enthusiasm. I still have some of Michael's baby things in the attic. There's a beautiful wooden cradle that Harold made, and his baby blanket is in perfect condition. Michael looked pleased, but Tiffany's smile tightened. "That's sweet, Florence, but we're planning a very specific nursery theme, modern minimalist, no old stuff." The word old carried a weight I couldn't quite define. I nodded and sipped my coffee, trying to ignore the slight chill that had entered the conversation. On the drive home alone in my car, I pushed aside the twinge of disappointment. She was pregnant hormonal, and every new mother deserves to create her own nest. I decided then to be supportive without being intrusive, never imagining how quickly things would deteriorate from there. The change in Tiffany became unmistakable during her second trimester. My weekly calls went unanswered, then reduced to brief conversations, where she seemed constantly in a rush. "Sorry, Florence, I'm heading into a meeting," or "we're just sitting down to dinner," became her standard responses before quickly ending our calls. Michael still checked in, but less frequently. When I asked about visiting, there was always some reason it wasn't convenient. Their house was being painted. Tiffany wasn't feeling well. They had plans with her parents. One Sunday, I brought over a homemade casserole, hoping to spare them cooking. Tiffany answered the door in workout clothes, clearly surprised to see me. "Oh, Florence, we weren't expecting you." She didn't invite me in, immediately blocking the doorway slightly. "I thought you might appreciate a home-cooked meal," I explained, holding up the dish. "It's Michael's favorite chicken divan." She took the casserole with a tight smile. "Thanks. Michael's actually napping. He was up all night helping me with my back pain." I nodded sympathetically. Pregnancy can be so difficult. My back was terrible when I carried Michael. I found that a heating pad really helped. Tiffany's expression changed subtly. "We're following my doctor's recommendations. Modern prenatal care has advanced quite a bit since the 70s. The dismissive tone stung, but I smiled anyway. "Of course. Every pregnancy is different." "Exactly," she said, already closing the door. "And we're doing things our way. Thanks for the food." The door clicked shut before I could respond. I stood there for a moment, hurt and confused, before returning to my car. That evening, I called my friend Barbara, recounting the interaction. "Classic controlling daughter-in-law," Barbara declared. "My sister went through this with her son's wife, started cutting off access as soon as the baby was announced." "But why?" I asked. "I've been nothing but supportive." "Because you're competition. You had Michael first, and some women can't stand sharing their husband's affection." I dismissed Barbara's assessment as too harsh. Surely Tiffany just needed space during this vulnerable time. The baby shower invitation came as a surprise, mostly because I wasn't asked to help plan it. Tiffany's mother hosted at their country club, and the event felt more like a society luncheon than a family celebration. I brought a beautiful hand-knitted baby blanket I'd worked on for weeks, along with a silver rattle that had been a gift from my own mother when Michael was born. When Tiffany unwrapped my presents, she barely acknowledged the blanket, setting it aside quickly. "Thanks, Florence. Very homemade." Several of her friends exchanged glances. The silver rattle received a similar reception. "Silver requires so much polishing," she commented, placing it back in its box. Meanwhile, she cooed enthusiastically over the designer baby clothes and electronic gadgets from her friends. Her mother's gift, a complete nursery set from a high-end boutique, received rapturous thanks. I sat quietly, feeling increasingly out of place among Tiffany's sophisticated friends. No one sat with me during lunch, and conversations around me hushed when I approached. At home that night, I cried for the first time since Harold's funeral. Something was very wrong, but I couldn't understand what I had done to deserve such treatment. The following week, I enrolled in a grandparenting class at the local hospital. When I excitedly told Michael about it, suggesting Tiffany and I could attend prenatal classes together, his response was discouraging. "Mom, Tiffany's already taking classes with her mother, and honestly, she feels you're overstepping. This is our baby, our experience." "Overstepping? I'm just trying to be involved," I protested. "That's the problem," he sighed. "Tiffany needs space to become a mother without feeling like you're looking over her shoulder judging her choices." "I would never judge her." "Maybe not intentionally," Michael replied, his voice gentler. "But comments about how you did things offering old baby items, it makes her feel like you don't trust her to make good decisions." I was stunned. "That wasn't my intention at all." "I know, Mom. Just maybe pull back a little for everyone's sake." After we hung up, I sat in my silent living room surrounded by photos of Michael growing up, photos that now felt like evidence of a relationship slipping away. 2 days later, I overheard a devastating conversation. I'd dropped off some pregnancy books for Tiffany, leaving them on their porch as requested. But I'd forgotten my reading glasses and returned just as they were bringing in the package. Their window was open, and Tiffany's voice carried clearly. "Your mother is driving me crazy. These books are from the Stone Age. She's just trying to help." Michael's voice defending me, but weakly. "Help. She's trying to control everything. I won't have her undermining me once the baby comes. We need to limit her influence, Michael. I mean it. What do you want me to do? She's my mother. And I'm your wife carrying your child. Who comes first, Michael? Who? There was a long pause before Michael answered. You do. Of course you do. I retreated to my car, my hands shaking so badly I could barely turn the key. The books I'd chosen were recent editions published within the last 5 years, but that wasn't really the point. Tiffany saw me as the enemy, and worse, my son was choosing sides. When my granddaughter Sophia entered the world on a snowy January morning, I received a terse text from Michael. Baby girl born, 6:43 a.m., 7 elbs, 2 uhs, both doing well. I called immediately, but the call went to voicemail. When I texted back asking when I could visit, the response came hours later. Tiffany needs rest, we'll let you know. For 2 full days, I waited by the phone, a beautiful bouquet and baby gift ready to deliver. Finally, Michael called. You can come tomorrow between 2 and 2:30, he said, sounding exhausted. Only 30 minutes, I asked, unable to hide my disappointment. Doctor's orders, limited visitors. Her parents were only allowed 30 minutes too. I would later discover this was a lie, as Tiffany's parents had practically moved into the recovery room. When I arrived at the hospital precisely at 2, Michael met me in the hallway. Just a few ground rules, he began awkwardly. Don't ask to hold her. Tiffany's very concerned about germs and bonding. No kissing the baby even on the head. And try not to offer advice, even if she seems to be struggling with something. I nodded, clutching my gifts, determined to follow every rule if it meant seeing my granddaughter. The room was filled with flowers, balloons, and stuffed animals. Tiffany sat propped up in bed, looking remarkably well-rested for a new mother. Little Sophia was swaddled tightly in a hospital blanket, sleeping in a bassinet beside the bed. Hello, Tiffany. Congratulations, I said warmly. How are you feeling? Tired, she replied simply. Thank you for coming. I approached the bassinet, slowly gazing down at my first grandchild. She was perfect with the dusting of dark hair and Michael's nose. She's beautiful, I whispered, tears welling up. Yes, she is, Tiffany agreed, her tone softening slightly. I placed my gifts on a side table. I brought these for you and Sophia. Tiffany barely glanced at them. Thanks, you can put them with the others. For the remaining 25 minutes, I stood awkwardly by the bassinet, asking polite questions that received minimal answers. Tiffany checked her watch repeatedly. When a nurse entered to check Sophia's vitals, Michael used it as an opportunity to end the visit. Mom, we should let Tiffany rest now, he said, already guiding me toward the door. But it hasn't been 30 minutes, I protested quietly. Sophia needs to be fed soon, he explained, though the baby was still soundly sleeping. I left the hospital feeling hollow, having barely glimpsed my granddaughter, and unable to hold her or even touch her tiny hand. The pattern continued over the following months. I was permitted brief visits, always supervised as if I couldn't be trusted. Video calls were scheduled, then canceled. Photos arrived sporadically, usually after I'd asked multiple times. When Sophia was 3 months old, I was finally invited to their home. Michael presented me with a printed list of house rules for visitors. No picking up the baby without permission. No kissing or close face contact. No feeding, changing, or putting to sleep. No unsolicited advice on parenting. Visits limited to 1 hour. I read the list twice, fighting back tears. Are these rules for everyone who visits? Michael looked away. Just for now, while Sophia's still building her immune system. Later that day, I saw Tiffany's mother cradling Sophia, kissing her forehead freely. When she prepared a bottle and began feeding her, I realized the rules were only for me. The final blow came when I wasn't invited to Sophia's first birthday party. I discovered it had happened only when photos appeared on Michael's social media, showing a lavish celebration with dozens of guests, including distant relatives and colleagues. I called Michael immediately. Why wasn't I invited to Sophia's birthday? Oh, he sounded genuinely surprised. Tiffany handled the guest list. I thought she sent you an invitation. You didn't notice I wasn't there. Your own mother. It was chaotic, Mom. So many people. I just assumed you couldn't make it. That night, I sobbed into my pillow like a heartbroken teenager. My son, who I'd raised alone after Harold died, hadn't even noticed my absence at his daughter's first birthday. The chasm between us seemed unbridgeable, engineered by a woman who had systematically isolated him from his only living parent. The unexpected phone call came 3 weeks after Sophia's birthday party. Michael's name flashed on my screen, surprising me since he rarely called anymore. "Mom." His voice sounded tentative. "We were wondering if you'd like to join us for dinner this Saturday, for your birthday." My 68th birthday was indeed that weekend, but I had expected it to pass unacknowledged as last year's had. "That would be lovely," I replied, trying to contain my excitement. "Where were you thinking? La Maison, that French place downtown you've always wanted to try. I made a reservation for 7. La Maison was an upscale restaurant I had mentioned wanting to visit for special occasions. The fact that Michael remembered touched me deeply. "I'll be there." I promised, already mentally planning my outfit. I spent more than I should have on a new dress, navy blue, with a flattering neckline, and had my hair professionally styled. For the first time in months, I felt a flutter of hope that perhaps things were improving. When I arrived at the restaurant, Michael, Tiffany, and little Sophia were already seated at a corner table. Sophia, now 13 months old, sat in a high chair looking adorable in a frilly pink dress. "Happy birthday, Mom," Michael said, standing to kiss my cheek. Tiffany offered a tight smile, but no greeting. Sophia babbled happily, banging a spoon against her tray. "Thank you for including me," I said sincerely, "and for bringing Sophia. She's grown so much." The first half hour went surprisingly well. We ordered appetizers and wine, and Michael asked about my garden and book club. Tiffany remained mostly silent, but civil. Sophia was cheerful, and I delighted in watching her explore her surroundings. "Would you like to try some of my soup, Sophia?" I asked, offering a small spoonful of my butternut squash bisque, cooled to a safe temperature. Tiffany's hand shot out, blocking my spoon. "She has food allergies. We don't let anyone feed her except us." "I'm sorry, I didn't know," I said, withdrawing the spoon. "What is she allergic to?" "We're still determining that," Tiffany replied vaguely, "but we're very careful." Michael changed the subject quickly, asking about my recent doctor's appointment. I described my clean bill of health, mentioning my doctor's comment that I could easily live another 20 years. "You should consider downsizing," Tiffany interjected. "That house is too big for one person, and all those stairs must be difficult at your age." "The stairs don't bother me at all," I replied, "and I love my garden and neighborhood." "Still," she pressed, "retirement communities offer so much more security for seniors. My grandmother loves hers in Arizona." The implication that I should move far away hung in the air. Michael looked uncomfortable but said nothing. Our main courses arrived, temporarily halting the conversation. I had ordered duck confit with roasted vegetables, a splurge for this special occasion. As we ate, I gathered my courage to address the elephant in the room. "I've missed seeing Sophia this past year. I was hoping we could establish a regular visitation schedule, perhaps Sunday afternoons." Tiffany's fork clattered against her plate. "Visitation schedule. She's not a child of divorce." "Poor choice of words," I amended quickly. "I just meant regular time together. Most grandparents see their grandchildren weekly." "Most grandparents don't try to undermine the parents," Tiffany muttered. "I've never undermined you," I protested, keeping my voice low. "I've followed every rule you've set. Rules we shouldn't have to set if you respected our boundaries," she shot back. Michael finally spoke up. "Let's not do this tonight. It's Mom's birthday." "No, let's be honest for once," Tiffany said, her voice rising slightly. "Your mother has been trying to take over since day one, offering outdated baby items, pushing her way into our lives, trying to create some weird do-over family with our daughter." Several diners at nearby tables glanced our way. "That's completely untrue," I said, fighting to keep my composure. "I just want to be part of Sophia's life. I'm her grandmother." "Being a grandmother is a privilege, not a right," Tiffany snapped. "I think I've earned that privilege," I responded, my voice trembling. "I raised a wonderful son who became a loving father." Sophia began fussing, perhaps sensing the tension. I reached into my purse and pulled out a small velvet box. I brought something for Sophia. It was meant to be for her first birthday. Before Tiffany could object, I opened the box, revealing a delicate gold locket with a tiny diamond in the center. "This was my grandmother's, then my mother's, then mine," I explained. "I wore it on my wedding day. I'd like Sophia to have it to continue the tradition." For a moment, Tiffany seemed speechless. Then her face contorted with anger. "You think you can buy your way in with family heirlooms? We don't want your outdated junk or your interference." In one violent motion, she swept her arm across the table, sending my dinner plate crashing to the floor. Duck confit and roasted vegetables scattered across the polished wood floor. "Witch!" she screamed, standing up. "You should have never come. We don't need you in our lives." The entire restaurant fell silent. Waiters froze mid-stride. Every eye turned to our table. Sophia began crying loudly. Michael sat paralyzed, his face ashen. I stared at my son, waiting for him to defend me, to say anything. He met my gaze briefly, then looked away, saying nothing. With shaking hands, I gathered my purse and the locket. "I see," I said quietly. "Happy birthday to me." I walked out of the restaurant with as much dignity as I could muster, feeling the stares of strangers burning into my back. In the parking lot, I finally allowed the tears to fall, sobbing behind the wheel of my car, feeling more alone than I had since the day we buried Harold. Sleep eluded me that night as I replayed the humiliating scene over and over, the sound of my plate smashing the hateful words, and most painful of all, my son's silence. My phone showed multiple missed calls and texts from Michael, but I couldn't bear to read them yet. What excuse could possibly justify his failure to defend his mother against such a vicious attack? At 7 a.m., Barbara called. "Florence, are you okay?" "Maggie Wilson was at La Maison last night and saw everything. She called me immediately." Maggie was a casual acquaintance from our neighborhood. The thought that she had witnessed my humiliation made everything worse. "It was awful, Barbara," I admitted, my voice raw from crying. "Michael just sat there. He didn't say a word." "That's it," Barbara declared firmly. "Enough is enough, Florence. You've been too passive, too accommodating. It's time to stand up for yourself." Her words resonated with something that had been building inside me through the sleepless night. For 3 years, I had bent over backward trying to appease Tiffany. I had accepted disrespect, isolation, and now public humiliation, all because I was afraid of losing what little access I had to my granddaughter. "You're right," I said, feeling a new resolve strengthen my spine. "No more." "What are you going to do?" Barbara asked. "I'm going to call James Patterson." James had been Harold's college roommate and remained a close friend throughout our marriage. As one of Connecticut's most respected family law attorneys, he had handled Harold's will and all our legal matters for decades. At 9 a.m. sharp, I called his office and was granted an immediate appointment. By 10:30, I was sitting in his elegant office recounting the entire history with Tiffany and Michael, culminating in the restaurant incident. James listened without interruption, his expression growing increasingly grave. When I finished, he removed his glasses and leaned forward. "Florence, what happened last night constitutes public harassment, possibly assault. We could pursue legal action on those grounds alone." "I don't want to sue my son," I said quickly. "Not your son, your daughter-in-law. But there's another approach we might consider." He pulled out a thick file labeled Caldwell Estate. "Do you remember the details of Harold's will?" he asked. "Generally. He left everything to me with Michael as the secondary beneficiary." James nodded. "That's the simplified version. What you might not recall is that Harold set up a trust fund for Michael's children with you as the trustee." He turned several pages in the document. "Furthermore, your house was placed in a living trust, with the provision that upon your passing it transfers to Michael, provided he has maintained, and I quote, a relationship of mutual respect and support with Florence." My mouth fell open. I had forgotten that clause. "Harold was protective of you," James explained. "He worried about Michael taking you for granted after he was gone. The trust gives you significant leverage." "What do you mean?" "As trustee, you have the authority to modify the terms of the children's trust fund. You could, for instance, stipulate that funds are only accessible if certain conditions are met, such as regular visitation rights with your grandchild." I considered this information carefully. "And the house? You could amend the living trust to remove Michael as beneficiary if you determine he has not maintained the relationship as specified. The house would then go to a secondary beneficiary of your choosing, perhaps a charity. The power of this knowledge was dizzying. All this time I had felt completely helpless when in fact I held significant financial leverage. "I don't want to use money to force a relationship," I said slowly. "Think of it as establishing boundaries with consequences," James suggested. "They've shown they're willing to mistreat you without consequences. Perhaps knowing there are financial implications will motivate better behavior." By the end of our meeting, James had drafted 2 letters. The first formally documented the restaurant incident, citing potential legal claims for public humiliation and emotional distress, but offering to forego legal action in favor of family reconciliation. The second letter outlined the trust provisions and my authority as trustee, noting that I was reconsidering the current arrangements in light of recent events. "Are you sure about this, Florence?" James asked as I signed both letters. "I've never been more certain of anything," I replied, feeling stronger than I had in years. "It's time they understood that disrespecting me has consequences." As I left his office, I felt a weight lifting from my shoulders. For too long I had accepted mistreatment to maintain peace. No more. Harold had provided a way to protect myself, and it was time I used it. The certified letters arrived at Michael and Tiffany's home on Monday morning. By noon, my phone was ringing continuously. I let the calls go to voicemail following James's advice to maintain distance until they had fully absorbed the implications. Michael's messages grew increasingly frantic. "Mom, please call me back. We need to talk about these letters." "Mom, you can't be serious about the trust. That's our house you're talking about." "Mom, Tiffany's really upset. This isn't like you. Please call me." By evening, the tone had shifted to anger. "This is completely unfair. You're trying to blackmail us with Dad's money." Tiffany sent a single text. "You'll regret this. Michael deserves his inheritance." I forwarded everything to James without responding directly. He called me immediately. "Classic reactions," he observed. "First shock, then panic, now anger. Next will come bargaining. Hold firm." True to his prediction, Michael called again the next morning, his voice conciliatory. "Mom, I think we need to sit down together and work this out. Families shouldn't be at odds like this." "I agree," I replied calmly. "James Patterson's office Thursday at 2 p.m. "Your lawyer's office. Can't we just talk at your house like normal people? After what happened at the restaurant, I prefer a neutral location with witnesses." Michael sighed heavily. "Can't we leave the lawyers out of this? This is a family matter." "It became a legal matter when your wife publicly humiliated me, and you did nothing to stop it." After some resistance, he agreed to the meeting terms. James arranged for Barbara to attend as an additional witness. Thursday arrived, and I entered the conference room feeling nervous but determined. Michael and Tiffany were already seated, both looking tense. Tiffany had clearly been crying, her eyes puffy and rimmed with red. Michael appeared haggard with dark circles under his eyes. James began by summarizing the events that had led to this point, his professional tone lending gravity to the situation. When he described the restaurant incident, Tiffany interrupted. "I lost my temper, okay, I apologize. It won't happen again." "Apologies are a start," James acknowledged. "But Florence has endured years of systematic exclusion and disrespect. A simple sorry doesn't address the pattern." Michael leaned forward. "Mom, we've been under a lot of stress with the baby and work. Things got out of hand, but we can fix this." "How?" I asked simply. They exchanged glances, clearly unprepared for the question. "Florence has drafted a family reconciliation agreement," James explained, sliding copies across the table. "It outlines her expectations for moving forward." Tiffany grabbed the document and scanned it quickly. "Weekly visits, holidays together, overnight stays when she's older. This is ridiculous." "Those are normal grandparent privileges," Barbara interjected. "What's ridiculous is that Florence needs a legal document to see her granddaughter." "This is emotional blackmail," Tiffany sputtered, turning to Michael. "Tell them—" Michael studied the document more carefully. "Most of this is reasonable, Mom. But the overnight visits, the holidays, that's a lot to commit to right now." "Those provisions don't begin immediately," James clarified. "They're phased in over time after consistent positive interactions." I finally spoke up. All I want is to be part of Sophia's life, to be treated with basic respect. Is that really too much to ask? No, but using Dad's money as leverage is wrong, Michael insisted. He wouldn't have wanted this. Your father included specific provisions about maintaining a respectful relationship with me, I reminded him. He anticipated potential issues and provided me with protection. Tiffany suddenly burst into tears, genuine ones this time. You don't understand. I was terrified. Of what? Barbara asked skeptically. Of losing Michael, she admitted through sobs. My parents divorced when I was 12 because my father always put my grandmother first. Every decision, every holiday, everything had to include her. Eventually, my mother couldn't take it anymore and left. Her revelation hung in the air. Michael looked stunned, as if hearing this for the first time. You never told me that was why they divorced, he said quietly. I saw the same pattern starting, Tiffany continued. Florence calling constantly, wanting to be involved in everything. I panicked. I went too far trying to protect our family unit. I absorbed this information, seeing Tiffany's behavior in a slightly different light. Not excusable, but perhaps more understandable. Fear doesn't justify cruelty, I said finally. You could have talked to me, explained your concerns. Would you have listened? She challenged. I considered the question honestly. Yes, I believe I would have. I never wanted to intrude, only to be included in appropriate ways. After that, the tone of the meeting shifted. We spent the next hour negotiating adjustments to the agreement. Weekly visits became bi-weekly initially, with a path to weekly as trust rebuilt. Holiday arrangements became more flexible. Overnight stays were postponed until Sophia turned 3. By the end, we had a document everyone could accept. As they signed, Tiffany looked at me directly for the first time. I am sorry about the restaurant, she said quietly. It was unforgivable. Not unforgivable, I corrected. Just unforgettable. We'll move forward, but I won't forget. Michael hugged me before they left. I should have defended you, he whispered. I was a coward. It won't happen again. As they walked out, I felt cautiously optimistic. The road ahead would have bumps, no doubt, but we had taken the first step toward healing. You did well, James told me afterward. You stood your ground without burning bridges. Harold would be proud, Barbara added, squeezing my hand. For the first time in years, I felt the balance of power shift. I had reclaimed my dignity and established clear boundaries. Now we would see if respect once demanded could grow into something more genuine. 6 months after our meeting in James's office, I sat in my living room watching Sophia stack colorful blocks on the carpet. At 20 months old, she was bright and curious with Michael's analytical mind and Tiffany's artistic flair. Cookie Gamma, she asked, looking up at me with hopeful eyes. After your nap, sweetheart, I promised, marveling at how easily Gamma had rolled off her tongue once she was finally allowed to know me. The bi-weekly visits had started awkwardly, with Tiffany hovering nervously and conversations staying superficial. But gradually, as weeks passed without incident, the atmosphere relaxed. Michael became more engaged, sharing stories from his workday and asking about my activities. Tiffany remained reserved, but unfailingly polite. The breakthrough came unexpectedly when Michael caught the flu, and Tiffany found herself alone with a feverish toddler and a major work deadline. Florence, her voice on the phone sounded desperate. I hate to ask, but could you possibly watch Sophia for a few hours? Michael's doctor put him on bed rest, and I have this presentation I can't reschedule. I agreed immediately, driving over with homemade chicken soup for Michael and activities for Sophia. When Tiffany returned that evening, she found Michael resting comfortably, Sophia bathed and fed, and dinner waiting on the stove. I don't know how to thank you, she said, genuine gratitude in her voice. No thanks needed. This is what family does for each other. After that day, something shifted. Tiffany began calling occasionally just to chat. She asked questions about Michael's childhood and actually listened to my answers. When I offered a family recipe, she accepted it graciously. One evening after Sophia had fallen asleep during a visit, Tiffany and I found ourselves alone on the patio. The summer evening was warm crickets chirping in the garden. Can I ask you something, Florence? Tiffany said suddenly. And will you promise to be completely honest? Of course, I replied, curious. Was I as terrible as I think I was? The directness of her question surprised me. You were pretty terrible, I admitted. But I suspect there's more to the story than I know. Tiffany stared into her iced tea. My mother left when I was 12, just packed up and moved to California with her yoga instructor. She calls on birthdays, sends Christmas cards, but she's basically a stranger. I'm sorry, I said sincerely. That must have been devastating. My father always blamed his mother for the divorce, said Mom couldn't handle being second fiddle to Grandma Rose, so I grew up hearing how mothers-in-law destroy marriages. Not all mothers-in-law are alike, I pointed out gently, just as not all daughters-in-law are alike. She nodded. I know that now, but when I got pregnant all these fears surfaced. I was determined not to let history repeat itself. So you shut me out completely. I thought I was protecting my family, she said softly. I didn't realize I was actually hurting it. Michael adores you. Keeping you away made him miserable, though he tried to hide it. We talked for hours that night, really talked woman to woman. I shared my own fears of being forgotten, of losing my only child to a new family unit. She confessed her insecurities as a new mother, afraid of being judged or undermined. I never meant to judge you, I told her. Every generation does things differently. I just wanted to be part of the journey. I think I can handle that now, Tiffany said with a small smile. Sophia deserves to know her grandmother, and honestly, I could use the help and advice sometimes. Turns out parenting is harder than I expected. The following Sunday, they surprised me by inviting me to brunch. As we entered the restaurant, I felt a moment of panic remembering the last disastrous dining experience. Different restaurant, Michael assured me, sensing my hesitation. New beginnings. Over waffles and coffee, we chatted easily about work gardening and Sophia's latest milestones. When the server brought a small cake with a candle, I looked at them questioningly. Happy do-over birthday, Tiffany explained, to replace the one we ruined. It wasn't my actual birthday, but the gesture touched me deeply. As Sophia helped me blow out the candle, I felt tears of gratitude well up. By my real 69th birthday, 6 months later, our relationship had transformed. Bi-weekly visits had naturally increased to weekly, sometimes more. I was included in family photos, invited to casual dinners, consulted on gift ideas for Sophia. For my birthday, they hosted a proper celebration at their home. Tiffany prepared my favorite lemon chicken, and Michael presented me with a photo album documenting Sophia's first 2 years, including many recent pictures of her with Gamma. As I prepare for Sophia's overnight visit next weekend, her first at my house, I reflect on how far we've come. The journey from that horrible night at La Maison to today has been challenging, but ultimately rewarding. What changed everything wasn't the legal threat, though, that got their attention. It was finally standing up for myself, establishing boundaries, and refusing to accept disrespect. Once I valued myself enough to demand better treatment, others began valuing me too. I keep the agreement in my desk drawer, but we haven't needed to reference it in months. The relationship we're building now is based on mutual respect and genuine affection, not legal obligation. Last week, Tiffany called just to ask how to make Harold's famous apple pie for Michael's birthday. As I shared the recipe my husband had perfected over decades, I felt his presence smiling upon this healing. Have you ever had to stand up for yourself in a family conflict? How did you balance setting boundaries with maintaining relationships? Share your experiences in the comments below. And if this story resonated with you, please like, subscribe, share, and join our community of people navigating complex family dynamics with grace and strength. Thank you for listening to my journey, and remember, it's never too late to reclaim your dignity and build healthier family connections.